The colony market on Ardent 6 opened each day with a low hum of voices, the smell of roasted protein, synthetic spices, and ozone from the energy shields blending into a strange, familiar comfort. Humans and aliens moved together yet apart, sharing the same spaces but not the same trust. Most mornings Elias Ward felt like an invisible observer in this delicate dance. The market was his routine, his quiet corner of peace after years of fighting and wars that had left scars not only on his body but in his mind. He had a small food stall near the central plaza, where he sold simple rations, packed protein, bread substitutes, and a few dehydrated vegetables. It wasn't much, but it was honest work. He watched the crowd carefully, noting their movements, their needs, and sometimes their desperation. It was during one of these ordinary mornings that he first saw her. She was small, almost childlike, her thin frame hidden under a ragged cloak. Her skin shimmered faintly, pale with a silver hue, the kind humans called Virexi. Elias didn't know much about the Virexi beyond the reports of past conflicts. They were clever, fast, and often mistrusted. But something about her eyes caught him, shimmering with fear, yet with a quiet determination that seemed to pierce the hum of the crowd. She lingered near his stall, pretending to look at other vendors. Her movements were hesitant, careful, yet there was a tension to her body that betrayed a purpose. Elias had seen this before. Hungry children during the siege of New Warsaw, or civilians hiding from soldiers during raids. He knew desperation when he saw it. When she reached for a ration pack, her fingers trembling, he was too slow to stop her. One moment she was there. The next she vanished into the crowd like a ghost. He barely had time to shout before she disappeared. The next day she returned, and the day after that, always the same thin, silent figure, always stealing a meal from his stall. Other traders began to notice and snicker, calling him soft. "She's just another thief," one of them said. "Report her and move on." Elias didn't move. He watched. He studied the way she approached, the careful glance over her shoulder, the hesitant grip on the ration. There was no malice in her actions, only need. On the 7th day, Elias did something he had not expected himself to do. He left an extra ration, placing it in plain sight. He didn't hide it, didn't set traps. He just left it there and said quietly as she approached, "It's fresher than the others." "Take it," she froze. Fear and disbelief flashed across her small features. For a long moment she said nothing. Her voice, when it finally came, was soft, almost unformed in human speech. "Why could you not stop me?" Elias looked down at her, pretending to rearrange his stock. "Because I've seen soldiers steal more than food. Maybe you're feeding someone who needs it." Her eyes widened and she hesitated, as if weighing whether to trust him. Then, almost too faint to hear, she whispered, "My mother, sick, no medicine. Only human food keep her warm." That night, Elias lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment. The war had ended years ago, but the dreams of fire and shouting, of broken cities and lost friends still haunted him. He had seen suffering before, had learned to turn his eyes away to survive. But now, in this fragile peace, a small hand of need had reached out to him. He could not ignore it. The next morning he prepared extra. Not just the usual rations, but items he had scavenged or purchased quietly. Powdered protein, rich in nutrients, warm soups that could be rehydrated with minimal water, and even some basic medical supplies. He placed them neatly, hoping she would see them and take them without fear. When she arrived, her steps cautious as always, she froze again at the sight. Elias gave a small nod. She hesitated, then gathered the items quickly, tucking them into her cloak. Her eyes met his for the briefest moment, and he saw something in them. Gratitude, fear, and relief all mixed together. She did not speak, and he did not ask questions. Words were unnecessary. Days turned into weeks. Elias continued to leave extra food, and sometimes small comforts. A soft blanket, a jar of preserved fruit, or a warm drink. He never confronted her directly. He only watched from a distance, studying her patterns, noting the way she moved through the market. Other humans might have called it foolish, but Elias understood. Small acts could ripple through lives in ways that battles never could. One morning he noticed a change. She came running, not with stealth but with urgency, her small legs moving faster than he had ever seen. Clutched to her chest was a small, fragile container. She looked around nervously and then darted toward him, pausing only long enough to speak in her soft, broken words. "Mother. Worse. Elias felt a pang in his chest. He had imagined the Virexi mother as frail, weak, and ill, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Without thinking, he motioned for her to follow. Together, they moved through the crowded market, Elias keeping a careful eye on both her and the surroundings. He led her to a quiet medical bay he had access to, one of the few left after the colony's health crisis years ago. It wasn't much, but it had the basic tools and medicines needed for minor treatments. The girl's hand shook as she handed over the container, revealing a small, weak Virexi woman curled inside. Her breathing was shallow, her body trembling with fever. Elias set to work, drawing on his training from years in field hospitals. He cleaned wounds, administered medication, and made a warm bed for the woman. The girl sat nearby, silent, watching, tears welling in her large silver eyes. For the first time, she spoke without fear. "Thank you," she said. It was simple, yet it carried a weight of trust and relief that Elias had not expected. Over the next few days, Elias and the girl, who introduced herself as Lyra, formed a quiet routine. He would prepare food and medicines, and she would tend to her mother. They rarely spoke much beyond necessities, but an unspoken understanding grew between them. In a colony where humans often saw aliens as threats, here was a human who had chosen compassion, and in a world that seemed harsh and unfeeling, Lyra had found an ally. Elias often thought back to his own past, the years of war, the faces of people he could not save, the missions where orders were followed even when they broke hearts. In Lyra and her mother, he saw a chance for redemption, a way to make peace with the parts of himself that had been hardened by violence. He also realized something about humans. Our strength is not just in battle or intellect, but in our ability to care, to act against fear for the sake of another. In that crowded, humming market, amidst the smells and chatter and hidden dangers, Elias understood that heroism often came quietly, in small acts of kindness that could ripple across lives. And as he watched Lyra feed her mother the meals he had prepared, he smiled to himself. Humanity had endured because of empathy as much as strategy, courage as much as strength. And perhaps in this small corner of the galaxy, the cycle of compassion would continue. One stolen meal at a time, one quiet act of care at a time. The days on Ardent 6 rolled slowly, but for Elias they carried a new rhythm. Each morning he prepared extra rations, medicines, and warm drinks, placing them carefully where Lyra could find them without fear. She came without hesitation now, her small silver eyes scanning the food stalls quickly before darting to him with a quiet nod of thanks. Elias never asked why she risked so much, and she never explained beyond the simple truth. Her mother needed care, and she could not survive without human food. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the colony, Elias noticed something different in the market. Groups of Virexi were moving through the streets, their posture tense, their eyes alert. They were not alone. Humans accompanied them, armed and cautious. Whispers rippled through the market, rumors of raids in the outer colonies, of smugglers and hungry mobs. Elias's mind shifted immediately to Lyra and her mother. What if they were caught in danger? What if the fragile peace of the colony broke suddenly? He could not allow that to happen. He packed a small kit of medicines, food, and supplies and moved toward the alley where Lyra usually appeared. She was already there, crouched low, holding her mother in her arms. Her face lit up briefly when she saw him, relief and fear mixed in equal measure. Her mother's breathing was shallow, and Elias realized her condition had worsened. He set down the supplies quickly, checking her pulse and temperature with a practiced hand. "This is serious," he muttered. "We need to get her somewhere safe, somewhere no one can reach her." Lyra nodded, clutching his arm tightly. Together they moved through the less crowded alleys, avoiding the groups of strangers and the noisy streets above. Elias's heart pounded. He had fought in battles before, but nothing compared to the fear of carrying another life. A fragile human or alien life, through a city that could turn hostile at any moment. Finally, they reached the abandoned medical lab that Elias had kept for emergencies. It was dusty, old, and quiet, but it had functioning systems, clean water, power, and basic medical equipment. He laid Lyra's mother down carefully, adjusting her blanket and checking her vitals. "You need to rest too," he said to Lyra, gently pushing her to sit beside him. She shook her head but did not argue. "I can't leave her," she whispered. "If I leave, something will happen. I have to stay." Elias understood. He had been in her place in many ways, feeling powerless, trapped, and desperate to protect someone he loved. "You stay," he said. "But I'm here to help. Together we can make her stronger." The next hours passed slowly. Elias administered medicine, monitored vital signs, and prepared nutrient-rich meals. Lyra stayed close, offering small words of encouragement to her mother, brushing back her silver hair, whispering soft phrases he did not understand but could see were meant to comfort. He marveled at the depth of care in her actions. Here was a species humans often feared, showing tenderness and devotion that transcended species or language. Over the next few days, Elias devised a plan. The colony's resources were limited, and the medical supplies he had brought were running low. If Lyra's mother was to survive, they needed more, and that meant he would have to reach out to the human authorities, the same people who might not trust a human helping an alien, or worse, a Virexi child moving through the market daily. Elias approached the colony's central command with a calm he did not feel. He explained the situation. A sick Virexi woman in need, cared for by her daughter, Lyra, who had been surviving through stolen rations. He did not hide the thefts, nor did he embellish them. He simply presented the truth. A life was at stake. The officers hesitated. Some murmured skeptical. Virexi and humans had a history of conflict after all, but Elias did not falter. He spoke of empathy, of humanity's strength not only in battle but in care, in the courage to protect even those society might call enemies. Slowly he convinced them to provide a limited supply of medicines and food, enough to stabilize the mother and allow Lyra to continue caring for her safely. When he returned to the lab, Lyra was waiting. She looked at him with a mixture of awe and gratitude. You trust humans," she said softly. Elias smiled. "Not all humans, maybe, but some of us." Yes. Days turned into weeks. Lyra's mother grew stronger. Her fever subsided. Her breathing became steady, and her eyes opened one morning alert and aware. The small medical lab, once dusty and abandoned, became a place of hope. Lyra laughed quietly, a sound that was bright and fragile like sunlight through a thin veil. Elias felt a warmth in his chest he had not known in years. Hope, accomplishment, and the quiet joy of saving a life without the roar of weapons or the chaos of war. Yet life on Ardent 6 was never completely safe. Rumors of raids persisted, and the market remained a place of tension. Elias knew that protection was not just about medicines or food. It was about presence, about watching, about showing that humans could act with honor and courage not only in battle but in daily life. He became a silent guardian for Lyra and her mother, blending into the crowded streets, always alert. One day, Lyra approached him with a question. "Why, you help me? You not even know me." Elias paused. He thought of all the battles he had fought, the orders he had followed, and the lives he had lost. And he thought of the small child, her mother ill, surviving only because she had courage to steal and trust to hope. "Because," he said finally, "we are strongest when we care for each other. That is what it means to be human." Lyra considered his words carefully. Then slowly she nodded. From that moment, a bond formed between them, quiet, steady, and unshakable. Not as human and alien, not as soldier and child, but as two beings united in compassion, courage, and survival. Months passed, and the colony slowly recovered from the shortages and fears that had plagued it. Lyra's mother regained full strength, moving through the market with grace and dignity. Lyra continued to help her, learning from Elias and observing his quiet acts of kindness. The community began to notice the transformation, not just in the small Virexi family, but in the example of what humans could offer: empathy, protection, and courage that inspired trust even among those once seen as enemies. One afternoon, as Elias walked through the bustling market, he saw Lyra helping a smaller Virexi child, offering a ration pack with the same care he had shown her. He smiled to himself. The cycle of compassion continued. Humans had endured because of empathy, because of courage, and because someone was willing to act even when it was risky or inconvenient. And here, in a quiet corner of a crowded market, humanity's best traits shone as brightly as any weapon, as strongly as any shield. Lyra's mother approached him later that day, steady now, her eyes full of gratitude. She bowed slightly, a gesture of respect across species. Elias felt a warmth he had not known since before the wars. "Thank you," she said simply. Words were enough. He did not need more. Elias returned to his stall, arranging rations for the day. He watched the people moving through the market, humans and aliens side by side, some with suspicion, some with curiosity, but all alive. In that moment he understood that strength was not measured in victories or territory, but in courage, kindness, and the ability to protect those who could not protect themselves. And he knew quietly that one small act of trust, leaving food for a child, had grown into something far greater than he had imagined. A human and an alien, a child and a soldier, two lives bound together by need and care, had created a ripple of hope in a world still learning peace. Elias smiled. Lyra waved at him from across the room, her eyes bright with life and joy. He waved back, knowing that the story of compassion would continue, quietly, steadily, and powerfully. And in that crowded, humming market on Ardent 6, humanity shone not as conquerors but as protectors, healers, and the keepers of hope. The sun set again, twin orbs casting long shadows across the colony. Elias leaned back against his stall, exhausted but at peace. In the quiet hum of the night he could hear Lyra laughing softly, her mother humming a tune he did not know, and the marketplace alive with life. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and uncertainty, but here, in this small corner, humanity had made a difference. And that difference mattered.